Over the last week or so, the East has exploded into a full-on arms race between the conference's two most talented squads. On Wednesday, September 27th, the Bucks made a huge splash, swooping in over Miami to trade for star guard Damian Lillard. The package to land Dame was steep, as Milwaukee parted with defensive stalwart Jrue Holiday, 3-and-D guy Grayson Allen, and a myriad of picks. At that time, many believed the Bucks had solidified themselves as the clear top team in the East with that move. That moment didn't last very long. Milwaukee's worst nightmare came true as the Celtics countered their Dame acquisition by trading for Holiday on Sunday, October 1st. When the Bucks made the Dame deal, in the back of their minds they had to know this was a possibility, but there were also plenty of other teams interested in Jrue. In the end, Brad Stevens saw his target and he didn't miss, which has been a developing trend ever since the former Celtics coach took over for Danny Ainge, who notoriously hoarded his picks and missed out on big trades down the stretch of his time in Boston. So far, Stevens hasn't been afraid to make risky moves, and that was the case once again on Sunday as he sent a pretty substantial package for Holiday that included Rob Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, and 2 first-round picks. Following this trade, the Celtics now boast the best top 6 in the league. That's pretty much indisputable. There's some potential flexibility for Joe Mazzulla to work with in the starting lineup, but how it will likely shake out is Holiday and Derek White at the 1 and 2, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum on the wings, and Kristaps Porzingis at the 5, with Al Horford playing significant minutes off the bench. That gives the C's a top 5 duo in the Jays, the best defensive backcourt in the league, and 2 elite floor stretchers at the 5 with their own defensive upside. Let's examine how the Bucks can match up with that. First and foremost, it's important to acknowledge that Boston would likely go big in a potential series against Milwaukee and start both Porzingis and Horford while sending White to the bench as they've done in the past. That said, those 2 six-man options are going to play extensive minutes, so the Bucks will have to have answers for both of Boston's respective death lineups. After acquiring Lillard, this is how Milwaukee is lining up. The star guard will suit up at the 1, with Pat Connaughton likely at the 2, Chris Middleton at the 3, Giannis at the 4, and Brook Lopez at the 5. It's not as much of a shakeup as Boston's lineup, but obviously replacing Holiday with Lillard will require a massive adjustment from the rest of the lineup. First and foremost, Milwaukee's offensive ceiling was exponentially inflated following this deal. A Dame and Giannis pick and roll is virtually unstoppable on paper, and there are plenty of shooters to support them on the roster. That said, I do have 2 main concerns about the Bucks following this move. The first one is obviously the defensive downgrade that Milwaukee is dealing with. Not only is Lillard a minus defender, but his predecessor just so happens to be the best player in the league historically when it comes to guarding him, and now he's suiting up for the Bucks' biggest competitor. I understand why Milwaukee felt the need to make this move, both from a roster shakeup standpoint and in order to keep Giannis happy with free agency looming. I'm just not sure they're a better team now with how steep the defensive drop-off could be. Secondly, and this is much less important but still worth noting, the Bucks now have 2 of the top 4 players in the league in terms of usage rate from last season. Giannis ranked 1st and Lillard ranked 4th. There will be a multitude of times throughout the regular season when Milwaukee needs a bucket and one of those guys will have to defer. If those decisions continue to result in winning games, there won't be an issue. But if the Bucks lose some of them, there could be some tension throughout the team over who gets the last shot. And don't forget about Chris Middleton, who is still a relatively high volume scorer for a third option. The Bucks have a lot of players who will want to put up shots and only so many possessions to do so. It's just something to monitor. Before I make my prediction on how this arms race will play out, I want to quickly address the other quote-unquote contenders in this conference. Firstly, the Miami Heat, who are in the midst of one of the most disastrous off seasons in recent memory. Not only do you miss out on Dame after months of landing him seemed like a foregone conclusion, but then new nemesis Joe Cronin turns and strengthens your other biggest rival by trading Holiday to the Celtics. All of that after losing Max Strus and Gabe Vincent this offseason. It's going to be an uphill battle for Miami this year, and likely one that will have a much more disappointing ending than last season. Heading to Philly, it's been a whirlwind for the Sixers in their own way this offseason. The James Harden situation is still being drawn out, and it's hard to imagine a way the roster improves following his inevitable deal, considering the contract and trade value. But hey, at least they got Kelly Oubre, who averaged 20 points per game last year on 17 shots. Joel Embiid summed it up pretty effectively. One team I have been consistently high on is the Cavs, and I still expect a solid showing from them. Not only did Cleveland address their biggest roster need by adding shooting at the wing, but this is one of the deepest teams in the league with legitimate high-end talent. I would give the Cavs an outside chance of upsetting the Bucks or Celtics in the postseason, but ultimately we're probably looking at an Eastern Conference Finals showdown between these two juggernauts if seeding permits. So, let's break down these individual matchups. Lillard is a headache for almost any defensive backcourt, but the Celtics have two of the best possible options for containing him in Holiday and Derek White, who has put himself on the map as a two-way force since being traded to Boston. On the wing, there's a clear edge, as Chris Middleton can't compare to the production Boston gets from Tatum and Brown. In the front court, it's worth noting that Al Horford has likely had the most success defending Giannis out of any player to ever line up against him, but I'm not going to act like he's actually capable of stopping him. The Bucks have a clear advantage there with Antetokounmpo and Brook Lopez, although as I discussed earlier, a duo of Porzingis and Horford is no joke. Overall, I look at the offensive ceilings of both of these squads, and they're pretty similar. The Bucks have the best duo, but Boston has 4 guys who are capable of dropping 35 on any given night. Defensively, there's a massive gap between these two squads on paper, especially if the Celtics can recapture some of the magic they found just 2 years ago. I think it would certainly be an entertaining matchup, but as things currently stand, I think the East will run through Beantown.